Sustainable You is a casual, interactive, yet informative series detailing and cataloging sustainability experience. Moreover, this is a short podcast docuseries detailing the thoughts and experiences of passionate advocates towards all things eco-friendly. Our journey is to know how and why understanding sustainable development towards the triple bottom line of people, profit, and planet can contribute to a more mindful, holistic, and inclusive world. Specifically, this podcast showcases what makes you a changemaker, innovator, and transformer as you tackle sustainability challenges to current and future generations to resolve the so-called wicked problems. Calgary Climate Hub is a local nonprofit that is a grassroots and volunteer-led organization championing climate change initiatives, educating and empowering Calgarians to become active climate citizens. As a nonpartisan initiative, Calgary Climate Hub encourages others who may otherwise be underrepresented and overlooked in the climate action movement to become mobilized and garner defense agency, collaborating, of course, towards a more sustainable and equitable future. For today's interview, I learned more about Calgary Climate Hub's advocacy efforts on climate change issues that matter most to Calgarians, from activism to growing microforests and it's truly eloquent to see the impact of
God, I guess I could check another one number of levels. Like, I think that uncertainty is baked into our process of incorporation and socialization. I think much of our societal structures aim to instill a conform relationship where we learn from at a young age to adopt that thinking mode of education. That idea, of course, comes from who talks about, two dominant modes of education, the big mode being like you're like mental, you don't know anything, and I'm going to fill you up with knowledge, and then you're going to repeat it back to me. So I think on the one hand, like just this small structure is important in the lessons written, and they're designed to do so. Maybe on like a more personal level, I'm trying to be like quite aware of the space I take up in my life, and the way in which sort of my boldness in communication can sometimes be maybe off-putting or unnerving for certain people. So I think sometimes when I start to think too much, or maybe get too reflective on how I'm communicating, I become a bit concerned.
Okay, great. Okay, cool. And just to get you to know you a little bit more and who you are, so again, tell me about yourself, your struggles, your aspirations, your contributions that led you to get involved in the Calgary Climate Hub and climate action in general.
Yeah, so I've been, quite concerned with issues of inequity in our society for a long time. My undergraduate work really focused on how civil society is seeking to create structures, work arrangements, relationships that are more equitable and just. So it's something that's really driven me in my life. After finishing my graduate work, I wanted to do more than just have a thesis sitting on my desk, and so I took my learnings and went to a worker at a based restaurant here in Calgary, which we ran for 5 years, and the goal there was to demonstrate a more equitable form of economy work, not just consolidating the economy, if you would, to sort of be an example both to Calgarians and beyond, around how we can do things better. During that time, I've been running the work with that. I was also managing another nonprofit with an environmental focus. And so I think these things obviously led me to my role here at Calgary Climate Hub. I am very much focused more on the realm of economy as the intersecting piece of inequity in our societies. And so, a lot of what I try to do is around addressing capitalism and the various issues of contemporary capitalism. See, there's less width in that realm, I suppose. People, talking about capitalism is still a challenging thing to do in our societies today, and it's way more abstract in terms of how you address it. But when you look at the issues capitalism is causing, I would say like day-to-day community cohesion, destruction of our ecosystems, increasing concerns around labor rights, access to healthcare, social services. All these things are things that people understand and things that we can address in a more concrete way. And so, when trying to think about the next stage of my life after closing down the island and putting on nonprofit, I saw this position for the hub. And while it doesn't deal directly with or overtly with issues of economy, I think it's a great way of me sort of dealing with things I care about. So I would like to say like this was sort of a blend of the two things that I most like to do most, which are addressing issues of inequity and just like building people up, empowering people. Those are two things that I really enjoy doing in my life. And so here at the Climate Hub, I get to do both in most of my day. So
Okay, great. Thanks for sharing and giving us a bit of an intro as to who you are. And when it comes to climate action, were you always involved, or was it more when you went to university, or did it come from a younger age? Where did you kind of grow that passion, I guess?
Yeah, maybe just rooted in a lot of nature, and obviously spending a lot of time outside as a kid and with my family. Definitely. I think probably being born and seeing the real impact of kind of runaway oil industry really drove me into the action. Just witnessing kind of the destruction of lands, abandoned oil wells, huge liabilities that are not being dealt with, invading the First Nations lands. All these things, really push me into the realm of action. So I'd say I've been an activist, I guess, my whole life. Though sometimes maybe I've focused a little bit more, on, like I said, issues of economy or issues of racism, or even folks through. So I think I've really like the comprehensive activist background, and the climate piece has always been amazing.
Okay, great. It's interesting to hear your perspective. And now just moving on to the next question. So, what do you find are the most important personal satisfactions and dissatisfactions connected with the sustainability sector, especially towards climate action and activism? And what do you find the most satisfying personally running this nonprofit? What do you find the most challenging? Do you want to talk more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Easily, that's kind of an easy question. Like, hands down, the most satisfying thing is connecting and unifying working class folks to take action on issues that they care about. I think there's nothing more inspiring and awesome to see than the community in action and the community in solidarity. And so it's so awesome just to see that just how many volunteers are just doing things because they care. Identified an issue, they connected with us to support them in it, and then they've realized an outcome. And it's just so rewarding, so inspiring to just see people creating and doing things because they care about our environment or issues of equity. When they're just like innovated and kind of a mass media cycle of negativity and despair, it can feel a bit isolating, and you can get quite despondent. So I think being in like a workspace, it's good to see positive people in action is just super rewarding. The most challenging or frustrating thing I would say is like maybe sometimes feeling like our actions aren't deep enough. Really feeling like we're stuck on a bit of a treadmill, I guess. We're trying to address climate issues, and we're trying to make a living while doing that. And so what that often means is we need funding, of course, and a lot of the funding comes from sources, whether it be a casino, as you can get here in Alberta, or maybe grants or funding from large foundations or granting agencies. If you sort of follow that money, a lot of it does come from, private banking industries or food industries. And so sometimes you feel like you are in the nonprofit or helping very people that are destroying the land and the world feel better about it and sorry that they're not so bad. And that's not really my intention in any way. As I said, we need to be really bold. And so we need to start really looking at those structural sources of inequity and climate impact. Maybe it's really doing it as a job. It feels like sometimes you have to use conceptually rather what it is.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing. It's definitely interesting to hear how you kind of handle everything. And for the next question, it's more building on this one. What motivates you to keep going in this field and pursuing this initiative? It seems like you would get a lot of burnout because it seems like you tend to wear a lot of hats. It seems like it, and like how do you deal with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Burnout is a very real thing. It's funny because I think a lot of the work in the nonprofit sector sometimes seems really focused on like the negative aspects of our society. We're generally trying to address an issue, right? People that are nonprofits, there's a problem, there's a societal issue, there's a source of inequity or oppression that needs to be addressed, and then you spend day in and day out trying to resolve it or find some solution. And so it's like your focus is really based on the negative aspects of our society while trying to create more positive realities. And that can get a little bit burdensome at times. What really helps me, I think what really keeps me going is I often remind myself that I do this work because I real life, because I do it. So in order to that, I take the opportunities I can to celebrate living. I ensure that I, give good time to my friends and family, that I'm feeding my soul through art and music. I get outside and I get traveling. I try to make sure that my job is not my entire life, because it's not. I do it because I love life and I want people to be able to live a life worth living, however they may determine that. And so I think something that is really helpful at times, and making sure that we take that time, and create some further boundaries in your work life to ensure you are enjoying life. I also do it because I got little kids and I care about them. I want them to have a world that they can live in and be happy about and secure. And I want their kids, successful generations to have a world worth living in. So, it's also a good motivator to keep that in mind. And also recognizing, I think maybe recognizing that you may not achieve your own goal in your life, but you're going to need progressing people on the pathway towards that goal. It also is sometimes really good and empowering. It makes you feel like, I don't have to solve it all, but if I can just push people, I can help people, I can walk with people a little further down the trail.
Okay, great. Yeah, no, it's definitely interesting hearing how you got involved and how where you are at right now. And now just to go a bit more, I know you talked a bit about your organization, but do you want to talk more what the Calgary Climate Hub is all about, its origins, how it began? And you can talk a bit more about, because I know you're also involved in community building, but I guess you can talk about how the Calgary Climate Hub advocates for climate change, action, leadership, and whatnot. Yeah.
So the Calgary Hub began in 2017, and it was, on its own, just people coming together and doing things because they care about it. It was, started by just some, two or three folks who just recognized that there wasn't enough being done in our city around there wasn't enough being done in municipal or policy level around climate change. So, they believed that we need to get together and start pushing into public policy and municipal space more, as well as educating and empowering Calgarians about the issues we're facing. So it really just started like that. Again, in connection with Climate Reality Project Canada, CRPC, it's a bunch of climate reality projects. So there's like this 2006 Al Gore inconvenient thing where he, after sort of was sick and doing some tours, he set up a project where they were trying to see climate across the US. So that's really at the beginnings. Climate Reality Project Canada supported those individuals and setting up a bit of a comp structure. And it just sort of grew from there. For many years, we just privately funded by these handful of individuals. We just wanted to sort of see this small project succeed. In 2023, we were able to achieve charitable status. And so now we've begun to have a bit more financial sustainability and independence, where we're able to access, a larger pool of revenue through grants and whatnot. We still are a volunteer-led nonprofit, and our goal is to unite all Calgarians working together to support meaningful local action on climate change. So we started representing a lot of communities and different cultures and countries, and we got a broad and diverse range of Calgarians and organizations need to be engaged just to develop solutions that fit our unique political and economic circumstances here in Calgary. So we use hub and spoke organizational model where we have nodes that may take on tasks, support when we're campaigns or whatnot. And then we have the central hub where we meet every month and coordinate activities, and then get the sponsoring of contractors who will be staff in 2025 and then into an employee model. I hope in 2025 is the model. And so they support, myself and other folks support programs, podcasts, some obviously administrative and amazing to them. Nobody supports Calgarians leaders on climate action. I guess our mission sums it up. It's mission to be educated and empower Calgarians to become active climate citizens, and that really is what we do kind of at the forefront, as we host climate conversations where we have experts from all over to meet with communities and talk about issues and solutions. We run advocacy campaigns every year. So we run 5 advocacy campaigns every year. That's these teams of volunteers come together and support connecting civil society action on issues that intersect with politics or policy issues that are being discussed. So we educate folks on things like asset mapping, organizing, leadership organizing, taking through the whole organizing framework, and then we empower them to design and realize a campaign over a year. We do that every year. We have a youth climate bursary that we award to students, and that's just kind of support students to, maintain their climate engagements and sort of a small recognition for the students that are engaged in climate activism. We have a class that we run every month, and it runs live on CJSLD as well once a month. And that also sees groups of folks doing awesome climate work from, in Calgary, but around Canada, and sometimes internationally. I come and talk about issues or things under the climate lens. So talking about issues and how they're addressing them. We have a ton of book club that meets regularly and sees folks gathering to read sort of like climate-themed books, both fiction and non-fiction, and then discuss. We have a eco elders program who supports seniors in climate action. One of the most effective segments of our populations in prison, municipal capacity, and seniors, and so we kind of support them to identify issues that they care about and take action. I can't remember if I missed anything. Yeah, that's probably it. We are starting a climate justice program with Mount Royal University and University of Calgary Social Work Department in January 2025. And so that will see teams of social work participants going around BIPOC and marginalized communities to discuss climate action and mobilization to improve one's health, one's cost of living, and try to support more BIPOC and marginalized engagement.
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, that's a diverse palette of you're doing so much. I'll have to get some of these resources from you after. This is really great stuff in the community. Yeah. Okay. Now
one more kind of key program that we do. It's a carbon tree equity or forest recovery. So we created a tree equity tool that demonstrates tree inequity in our city. So it's a map that shows you the difference in tree canopy across our communities. And then we have a program for forest recovery where we ideally go into those equity diverting communities and support them in installing tree forests. So we use the eyeopening method, which was a method designed by a Japanese botanist in the 1970s named Akira Miyawaki, and he devised this method of planting super dense native species in an area that support the rewilding lands and maturation of forests. So forests can mature much quicker, maybe 2 to 10 times quicker depending on your environment planted this way. And so we've planted 40 forests across the city. We have one more set for next summer. The world trade is doing one every year. To expand tree planting in our city and expand the city.
Oh, wow, that's really cool. I didn't know about that. I guess that's really cool you're involved in both environmental and social impact. It seems like it's very holistic and inclusive. what you're doing. I think it's great that the work you're doing, it's much needed. Okay, great. Now that we've learned a bit more about the Calgary Climate Hub, actually a lot more, I guess we can go on to more, I guess these are more going to be a bit more technical questions.
Sure.
So, not that I'm going to be testing you or anything, let's try our best. But the first one would be, what would be your personal definition of sustainability and sustainable development?
Yeah, I mean, I can give you a technical definition. I guess instead maybe what I'll share is, in my mind, sustainability means only using, taking, consuming what one needs. And so it's about making sure that there is enough for everyone, and enough, maybe to use the words and the language and the teachings of those people. This time, make sure there's enough for 7 generations from now. And in my mind, that should be a cornerstone of sustainability, sustainable development. And we need to ensure that we don't take more from the planet. And what we also need to make sure that we are in a reciprocal relationship with our environment. And so, we should also be doing. I think that was a big thing that in terms of sustainability would probably be better.
Okay, no, it's great. And is there a particular sustainable development goal that you best advocate for? And the second part of the question is, do you still think these metrics hold merit?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I mean, the SDG goals are awesome. I would say they're really great ideas. I don't know that I could pick one. I feel like our work and my interests intersect with so much of them. I mean, obviously, no poverty. But, it's like they're all really great. In terms of I guess this is where some of the issues come from. It's good to create a North Star, and it's awesome to have a goal. But what is the reality in realizing those goals? Especially when we think about a global interconnected planet like we have today. Everyone is a global institution. It's hyper aware of the current globalization existing. They can make a claim no poverty. What does that even mean within a globalized capitalist economy? How would that even begin to be realized? Zero hunger. Yeah, there's no reason that couldn't happen. We have more than enough in terms of food and resources for everyone in society. But how did that happen? Again, we don't address the very symptom of production and distribution that determines who can eat and when and why. I think I could talk about the rest, but I think that's a good enough example. I think these are awesome goals. I think it's important to have these North Stars. I think they need a lot more work. I think there needs to be a lot more clarity on how these goals will be achieved.
Hey, yeah, no, it's interesting to hear your perspective that you're right, they are a North Star, but I guess you can't take them too literally. But for me, it's interesting in grad school to see that. I don't know if it's maybe a Swedish thing, but they were bashing on the SDGs, and they're like, oh, well, and it could be just a different cultural perspective, but they're very much they buy into the Anthropocene, and it's very human-centered, self-centered, and it doesn't really take into account all flora and fauna, and we should adopt an ecocentric perspective. So I never really saw that before, because wherever, any school here, any institution, any university would here, they would be almost promoting those, and then I think, and then just other things too on that, who's funding them, and then like you said, but, it made me wonder more about why, how literally should we take them. So.
Yeah, I mean, that was great that they have them, but I think there needs to be a subset of achievable SDGs, right? And the short term, and how does that lead to a larger goal? Because it sort of sometimes feels like it's you just ask the kid what their perfect world would look like. They rattle all these things off. What, right? So,
right.
Yeah.
That's fair enough. Okay, now moving on to the next question. So, from your perspective, what are the problems you see working in this field? And is there a particular, maybe social problem that you've identified that's maybe like one burning problem that you see that you're responding to right now?
I guess like what I say, because I shared a number of inspirational goals, issues that I would like to address, whether it be climate degradation, capitalism, exploitation, individual divisions of our population, etc. But I think ultimately the real work that we're doing, the real issue I think that maybe we're trying to address is that lack of cohesion in community. I think really ultimately my role in any place I am is to empower and connect people. So I think that is really the major piece that we all need to work on, whether we're working in the climate realm or poverty realm or wherever you may find yourself. I think ultimately the goal is you need to make people feel okay and you need people to feel connected and they belong somewhere with someone. And so really, I guess that's what we, really what we're doing. We're trying to get people to take action on climate change, but we're connecting the community. We're helping people recognize that they have power and that they have unique knowledge, and that they can then translate that into action. So yeah, I think that's the major social issue we're working on. Yeah, I already shared my frustrations around the nonprofit challenges that faces. So those are also some major issues. Obviously, we encountered here over many nonprofit.
Okay, great. And just moving on, I guess it's kind of, moving on to the next question. Are there particular skills that are very key or important for becoming a change maker or leader in when it comes to climate action?
Yeah, I guess just in that sort of broader approach of trying to unify and empower, I think one of the best things that in a leadership position can do is make sure that they take a critical pedagogical approach, so they really recognize the unique skills, understandings, and perspectives that every person brings, and then they create a space for those people to share those perspectives, and then feel heard and included. Kind of take some of their own biases or assumptions that are obviously also super important. And again, just really giving people the skills, helping people to identify, find, learn, acquire the skills that they think they need to achieve their goals. And really helping them back that I think is also super important.
Okay, great. And I'm just gonna this next question. So what's your perspective? I'm curious to learn on things like citizen activism, again, environmental activism towards concepts like just sustainabilities. I'm sure you heard of that. At least I can read out the definition for you, but it started by this American scholar. I'll just read it out for you, and then you can respond to that. So it's okay. So it is okay. So sustainability cannot be simply a green or environmental concern, important though environmental aspects of sustainability are. A truly sustainable society is one where wider questions of social needs and welfare and economic opportunity are integrally related to environmental limits imposed by supporting ecosystems. And again, that's just by Julian Eggman, the founder of Just Sustainabilities. You can argue even contributed to things like BIPOC. But do you want to talk more about that? Because I know the Calgary Climate Hub does work in that area. Do you want to talk more?
Yeah, totally. I mean, this is entirely my perspective. I think 90% of the climate economy and the race, able-bodied, any identity category you can think of. I think any identity category and social or economic issues. For me, they all are interrelated, right? And that speaks to, this isn't new, it speaks to that historical concept of intersectionality, which provided the feminist movement. And the idea that, like, in the individual, their identity intersects in a number of ways, and in issues of inequity and oppression, those issues intersect. And so, as I kind of said at the outset, in my mind, those things often intersect in the realm of our economy. And so, climate action should be economic action, and climate action should be anti-racism action. Climate action should be, promoting LGBTQ identity. So, just totally in accordance with that perspective, here at the Climate Hub, we're already trying to advance, beyond just like the discussions we have with people at tree planting or whatever. We all kind of bring up issues of economy or issues of working class division. But beyond sort of just like speaking with our communities and exploring issues collectively, as I said, we are beginning a climate justice program in 2025, which will directly look at drawing, highlighting, exploring the intersection of climate issues, and really trying to support people to affirm their needs through climate action that also helps them achieve their needs. That may come from economic issues, and then also connecting and growing that collectively with others so that we can have benefits beyond just environmental. It needs to be, improving, for example, maybe efficiency will lower your cost of living, right? Or working with the community to create a food security project is not only going to localize your food production, but it's also going to create more stability in your life, through access to food, but also through increased community connection. So, I would think that these things need to be operating in tandem. Climate action is not just about creating green spaces and making sure our trees and our rivers and our watersheds are safe, but it's about us speaking.
Right. Okay. No, it's good to hear because I didn't know that, and I think that a lot of like what I like about your organization is that again, it's very inclusive across the divide because you already have a lot of like activist movements, like you have Extinction Rebellion. That was really big abroad, and then you have things like Fridays for Future. I remember when I worked in corporate news, I covered some of those, and then as part of my column, but they're not. Again, they're very much siloed. They're not kind of addressing all these needs. But yeah, that's great. And just on this next, building on this, do you have any like valuable advice you want to give to those interested in citizen activism? So this nonviolent civil disobedience for climate action, especially if they, if they're marginalized or they lack a sense of agency, how can they get more involved?
Yeah, connected groups, I think, is an awesome start, right? Like, you can just go through yourself as a lone wolf at an issue. It's not the most impactful, and it's, right with issues. For instance, if you are ever going to encounter a legal issue or kind of conflict, you don't have the support of the community with you, you're alone. And also, like, the story of one person yelling is not as strong as the story of 100 people yelling. So, I just think groups recognize that the emotionality, I think, is maybe something that people don't always recognize, like just how high emotions are when you try to do a form of action or civil disobedience. On both sides, the police, the company, the people protesting, whatever it might be, everyone is really charged, and that can be very stressful. And it can take a toll on me. So that's another reason that I think it's really important to do organizing the community, working with people on these issues. The conversation can be extremely simple and like with nations, it can also be just so rewarding and exciting and invigorating to connect with folks and take action on an issue you care about. So yeah, I think there's a role for it. There's a key role for civil disobedience in our society. Must not only continue but grow, and it's important that it grows in an intentional.
Okay, great. And do you believe there's some sort of pattern or formula to becoming a successful activist? Like, do you want to, I think you mentioned it a bit before, but do you have anything more to say on that?
I don't think only one way. I don't think you don't. Like, I guess just making sure that you're open and understanding and accepting of others and other viewpoints. I think humanizing everyone helps too. It's really easy sometimes to just be like, oh, that person's just like a fucking fun with, whatever, fucking interest or whatever it is. But, a lot of people, especially working class people, are in these positions because they often don't have a choice. They are stuck in the same cycle of wage slavery and capitalist exploitation as many of us are. And so, they're doing what they can, as best they can, given what they have. And it's important, like, as activists, to recognize that you are dealing with people. Um, and yeah, make sure that you just stay true to what's in your head and kind of, make sure that what you're doing is growing equity, growing community connection, and growing empowerment, and not working to make or still additional divisions across people.
Okay, great. Okay, so for this next question, so I wanted to know, how do you measure your social impact on the local community, social and environmental impact? Yeah, so I can go a bit more into that, but if you have anything to say on that, that'd be good.
Yeah, like, I think getting charitable centers working more on like implementing like pre-post test surveys with participants in various things. Obviously we have a commitment to doing some level of like GHG sequestration monitoring, tiny forests. We look at the people that come to the events and the connections drawn between the coalitions that we build across different organizations. But we're not really like putting it to some solid metric right now. Oftentimes funding requires that, so we'll be moving more towards formalizing, our measure of social return. Um, but I would say it's fairly loose right now. We set on a project that's based in rooted in community care and concern, and if we achieve that project, then I think that's how we're demonstrating.
Okay, great. Okay, and then just to go a bit more into this, so especially the social, like both, I guess, both aspects. So how do you find underrepresented, like marginalized areas of the city? So for example, if I like, because you had mentioned you're originally from Calgary, so let's, I guess, focus on like the northeast quadrant of the city. So that part of the city, as you know, tends to receive the least amount of investment. So how can an area like that mobilize more towards, I guess, climate change advocacy? And again, how can we use environmental justice to resolve these issues rather than just kind of leaving these places on the fringes as like stigmatized outcasts? I'm super curious because I was born and raised here too, but I mostly grew up in the Northeast and just kind of I read up on your website how they're saying how I think Saddle Ridge is one of the it doesn't have as much canopy tree coverage.
Right.
And I noticed some of these things when I worked in corporate news as well. But do you want to talk more about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess what I can say just far as like the tree equity map tool is, I think, a really great starting point for talking about these issues. What I will do, when we look at natural diversity, why is the canopy spread the way it is? What's the historical context for this? What's the given the socioeconomic reality tied to this, and what needs to change? In terms of like mobilizing marginalized or BIPOC communities and taking more action on, I mean, that's exactly what this climate justice program is that we're rolling out in 2025. And I think it starts with, I think it starts with people sharing those stories and sort of trying to understand themselves. And, I think, if we can make a bit of an assumption, oftentimes BIPOC and marginalized folks are facing other, socioeconomic realities, and that's have less time, the ability to engage in advocacy that's needed, maybe to draw attention to the issues they face. And so, connecting more with the community, some of those tasks can be shared more and allow for more time for people, to divide up those issues and realize some of their outcomes. So, No, really, I'm leaving there because the point at the end of the day is we hope to learn more in January of 2025 Justice Program, and we hope to collectively identify both the reason and the solution.
Okay, great. Yeah, no, I saw like how you mentioned the Calgary tree equity. I think it's amazing that you have projects like this to, to raise advocacy, but also to get people more involved. I think, like you said, it is a socioeconomic reality, and maybe it's just a matter of raising awareness. Because I know they had, at least from when I was following this stuff before, that they had started like putting more community gardens in there. So I think it is getting better for mobilization, but it's good to hear your perspective on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, if we can be, I guess, just really honest, I mean, the reality is we have, a settler colonial society rooted in historically racist material perspectives. And so, it's no surprise that, the marginalized communities primarily in our society are, white settler society dominates. And we know that. We know that we live in a patriarchal racist society largely. And a lot of things that that's not us, and I'm not that way, and with us, and whatever. We have to look at the structures of our societies, the realities of our societies to see that, maybe other people may not believe that's the truth, the way in which our society is going to demonstrate.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, no, it's eye-opening for me too, because I kind of thought about if when I come back, like how can I genuinely contribute to like, Calgary, and so it's great that there's like, these like initiatives out there to do something about it and to raise awareness. So yeah, that's great. Okay, so just on that, I guess I'll move on to the next question. So how do you find that, especially youth and younger persons, can be taught to become leaders in the emerging sustainability sector? So I'd mentioned this before. We just did the interview just a little bit. So as you can see, Alberta is currently, well, it kind of has since the recession, I would argue, but it's been facing a brain drain due to the lack of opportunity many young people are facing. So at least I know my friends, all of them graduated and they relocated elsewhere because they really didn't want to work in oil and gas, just to find more meaningful and purposeful work. So is like the Calgary Climate Hub somehow involved to mobilize youth to gain agency? Because you did mention that you have some programs in schools and whatnot. So yeah, how do you I guess inspire them to become leaders in their community? For example, do you teach them to become entrepreneurs, to run their own business, their own maybe social enterprise? How can you get I guess I'll keep reading and then you can just respond. So how can you get youth more involved in political advocacy as well? So just to mobilize for change.
Yeah, it probably doesn't have a specific youth focus, but we are connected with distribution, and we obviously get a ton of youth events. As I did mention, we have the youth climate activism pursuit, so we are trying to really support individuals. We have individuals that we can back to, and I think that's one of the best ways we can actually help them take on the leadership roles, give them expanded capacity to focus their training efforts. Beyond the hub, I guess what I would say is we need to create curious, empowered, and inspired youth. And so, again, we created structures in our society that seek to socialize people as subordinate to hierarchy, different to technocrats and experts, and sort of and not the other machine. So, if we want to make our societies first and our youth have to really explore what excites them, then we need to address those sort of structural issues. Whether it be our educational institutions, our banking institutions, economic and government institutions. Again, it's hard to say we can create a program that will inspire youth to learn how to take climate leadership when they get out of high school, but I would argue that's a bit of a band-aid approach. We probably inspire youth to take action throughout their education, and then we would have these fully developed human feel energized to realize great projects to make the world better. So, yeah, I think the structural approach is what's most needed.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'm just gonna skip the question on you kind of did talk a bit about your core values, so I'll go on to the next one. Okay, so we didn't talk too much about, I guess, your stakeholders. So, how do you effectively communicate all these sustainable initiatives that you're working on with both your internal and external stakeholders? Like, how do you, I guess, do you have a specific approach to doing that?
Well, it's pretty standard nonprofit stuff, social media. We have newsletters that go out every 2 weeks. We write blog posts and news updates. Let's say that's.
Okay. Oh, great.
We have them.
Right. Okay. Okay. I meant to ask this one before a bit when I asked your definition, but I can ask it now. So, a lot of it has to do around degrowth because a lot of, at least what I learned again is that, the term sustainable development itself is it's a paradox in and of itself. And I know you work, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you work with a lot of businesses, I'm guessing, and yeah,
We don't have we do have some sponsors, but our corporate sponsors are generally in the renewable energy sector.
Okay.
I guess we don't have a ton of business connection, I would say.
Okay. Well, I guess you can still answer this question if you want.
Sure.
Yeah, I think it would be cool to hear your opinion on this. So how do you find businesses can balance sustainable goals while also striving towards economic growth? And again, as I mentioned, it seems like sustainable development is an oxymoron. That's why you have movements like degrowth coming out. And you probably know what degrowth is. So what are your whole thoughts on, again, this degrowth movement and I guess commodification, especially towards minimalism, because you did mention a little bit about that before.
Yeah, I would say it's a fundamental component of creating a more sustainable world. If I could turn again from what I attended the Assembly of First Nations Climate Gathering last month, which brought First Nations leaders, youth from all over Canada, come and speak about the various projects and things that are getting over 3-day conference. And, one of the things that kept coming up was this idea of total enrollment. And so, cap and trade, for example, or sustainable development, for example, these are forms of colonialism. And ultimately, the goal is not about trading pollution for targeted benefits or but it's about leaving the issue in the ground in the first place. It's about respecting our ecosystem. It's about recognizing our place in the world. And so, I think these are simple concepts that have lived on in many cultures for a long time, and they are a fundamental piece of creating a sustainable world. In terms of the business sector, I don't think businesses have the I think most businesses, even social enterprises, have the capacity of limiting the growth to the level that is needed without some sort of structural support or change in our socioeconomic realities. So, what I mean by that, for instance, I don't think a bank is going to stop trying to maximize profits for its shareholders, and that creates a number of issues. For instance, as a business owner, you may be renting your space, and the owner of that building has a mortgage out with the bank. And so if the bank has the opportunity, they're going to raise the rates, and those rates will be passed on to you as a business owner. If there's an issue and you need to some sort of rent forgiveness or delay, often things that won't be allowed, right? Because at the end of the day, it doesn't even matter what the landlord wants. The principal control holder, the bank, the person that actually is making all the calls at the end of the day is demanding that those payments are made and that those payments go up, regardless of the socio-economic realities. And so I don't believe in benevolent capitalism. I don't think that's a thing. I think I do believe that people are mostly good. I do believe that humans want to be accepted, loved, and have something, but if we want to make a thriving world with thriving people, we need to make structures that encourage people to do that. And if we want to make a basic world with lots of issues, then we can continue with the structure that we have now, because that's what they incentivize. They don't incentivize people to be the best version of themselves. They incentivize people to be the best economic version. And that's not always in the interest of our society or our environment.
Hey, yeah, no, that was really interesting to hear your perspective on degrowth. Because when I heard it, my mind was blown. I didn't really comprehend it at first. But I guess like what you mentioned, you work with a lot of Indigenous people, and again, it's just organizing the economy around genuine human needs, not really necessarily capitalistic interests. So it's it's interesting to hear your take on that.
Thanks.
Okay, so I'm just gonna see what I haven't asked you. Oh, okay. So I am curious about this because I got to know a bit more about this when I attended, as I mentioned earlier, the Calgary Common Good, and they were mentioning something about the Green Line. I guess what are the current and potential policy interventions that can promote more sustainable practice and trends, not just in Calgary itself, but Alberta-wide, or maybe even across Canada? Do you have any? I know it's a very broad question, but yeah, if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, what we need to do, as I keep coming back to, is create the sectors that support people to live more sustainable, empowered, and fulfilled lives. So, that's on the realm of the Green Line. Free public transit to me is like a no-brainer. Not only are you going to reduce congestion on the streets, but you're going to reduce healthcare costs through automobile accidents. You're going to lower your pollution in your cities. If you have an effective transit system that goes fast and is actually working well, then you'll probably get rid of road rage and all kinds of other societal ills that culture has. So. That's one example. Obviously, banking systems that don't seek to exploit people at every turn could also make people make good decisions. Ensuring that our water sheds and forests are used just as they're needed, but not just for vital water exporting to mass. These are all things that we probably need to do, and at the policy level. So the next impact I go to our advocacy campaigns, because that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to ensure that the Calgary Climate Plan is effectively aligned with our local area development plans. So the Calgary Plan is just like a strategy that the city is need, and we just want to make sure that when the city thinks about developing new areas, they're ensuring that there's safe, affordable, secure, and friendly housing for all Calgarians. And that's really just them honoring their own. If you think about transit, we're trying to ensure that ridership issues are addressed. So these are issues like digital tickets being expiring when physical tickets never expire, lack of effective information around transit times and buses, things like paying for running transit costs. We pay one of the high transit fees here in Calgary. We have very little result of it. So what we want to do is make it so it's easier for people to ride transit. It's less expensive for people to ride transit. It's more attractive for people to ride transit. Our Clean Electricity campaign is looking at getting back our municipally owned energy company to onboard a gigawatt of renewable energy. There's been committed to do so by 2030. The city is the one who's created a climate plan, declared a climate emergency, and now we're trying to help them create the realities that support more sustainable citizens and more sustainable realities.
Okay, great. And just on that, how can, and you probably did mention this, hopefully it's not repetitive, but how, I guess, can one get more involved in political, lobbying, especially against these big and powerful corporate conglomerates? Because I remember because you've heard of the single-use plastics ban, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
It was overturned, I think, last November, but I remember breaking that news story, and I'm like, oh, finally, we're already in the Stone Age. Which finally, this should have come a long time ago, but now it's not in effect anymore. Is there like what else can I guess how can the average person what can they do to get more involved?
Yeah, I mean, like, the clear answer first and foremost is become a member of the Calgary Climate Hub.
Right.
But I mean, really, connect with any organization that's doing work that you think matters. You need to add your voice. You need to join civil society. You need to join your fellow working class folks in taking out on issues that you care about. And so, we're the kind of we take that are constantly more established right now that you think globally, but you act locally. And so we are municipally focused because we believe it's at this level that we can enact the most change. It's really hard after like a transnational, corporation or even a federal level of government. Things become a lot more difficult, a lot harder to achieve. If you scale that down to your sort of local municipal level, then you can actually go and meet with your councillor quite soon. You can connect with people in the community and grow a movement that wants to address an issue. And so I think that's what I would just say to everyone is join an organization, connect with your community, work on growing a movement, affirm your needs. You have power, you have knowledge, and you have the ability to do so.
Okay, great. No, it's very practical advice. It's great. And I just on this next question, I don't know if you have volunteers per se, but this is, I guess, anyone, even people that are your followers, with the Calgary Climate Hub. So I guess how does your relationship with your volunteers, your followers, how does it strongly affect how you shape and develop the Calgary Climate Hub? And and the second part of that question, have your followers, I guess, expectations and demands for climate change advocacy changed since and has that impacted how you operate your organization?
So yeah, I mean, the Calgary Climate Hub is fundamentally volunteer led and run. Our volunteers are everything to us. And as I shared at the start, being here and seeing volunteers just care about something and then move on it is everything to me. It's the most inspiring and awesome thing to be able to witness. So our volunteers are the cornerstone of our organization, and it is their interests and their desires that often lead our actions. And I think that's what it means to be a good ally, to be a good supporter, and to help empower people. You want to create the space and the structure that will allow them to realize their goals. And I think that's what we strive to achieve here at the Calgary Climate.
Okay, great. Okay, and then for this next question, you sort of already answered it, but if you want to go a bit more into that, and again, it's just is there any particular attributes and characteristics that I guess contribute most to, I guess, again, being involved when it comes to climate action? So basically what I'm asking is, do you have any more sage advice for pioneering innovative, sustainable change through community building? And do you want to go a bit more into that?
I don't know that I do, to be honest. I don't know about this to be beyond what I've kind of already shared. I think I would just say, again, be bold, make sure you're drawing connections and unifying people. Everything that you do. The tactic of divide and conquer is as old as time itself. And if we fall prey to that, then we will not be effective. So I just want to remind anyone who's engaging in activism or beginning their practicing activism that it's easy to trigger people's egos and to sow divisions amongst people that are all working towards a collective goal. And that's a tactic that is actively used by people to build up movements. So I would just remind everyone to really take a deep breath, let your ego out of it. No one is a better activist than anyone else. We're all just doing what we can. And that's the most important thing, that you just really unify people and the best from what you're doing.
Okay, great. I know you had answered that before, but
I thought I would just ask one more time.
Yeah.
And okay, so I'm just going to be wrapping up our interview. Sorry, I went a little bit beyond the time. So for you, this last kind of question is, so what is the future vision for the Calgary Climate Hub? What are your personal thoughts on the future of, I guess, climate change advocacy? Do you want to go more into that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in terms of like Calgary Climate Hub, I just really hope that we can continue to grow this like awesome community of engaged and caring citizens. Again, like I think I've said multiple times now, I think that is the most important thing that we can do is help create a structuring space where people can come and connect, feel empowered, and recognize that they can make a change. And so I just hope that we continue to grow that across all of Calgary, and that we really look to include more and more segments of our population from all over the city that can realize that they can do things for climate.
Okay. Okay, great. And do you have any final thoughts or something that you want to share that maybe I missed or we haven't really talked about?
No, I don't think so. I guess strong together. That's the final takeaway. I would just say that's my top phase lately. So yeah, stronger together.
Okay, good. No, I like that you have a catchphrase. It'll make you more memorable. Okay.
Thanks for this. Really good to see you. Like I said, maybe get involved in the Calgary Climate Hub. You can like volunteer section to see kind of if there's any future opportunities you're interested in right now. Yeah.
Thanks so much for tuning in to another eye-opening episode of Sustainable You. Again, this is an extraordinary and engaging info series whose purpose is to make sustainable development and sustainability accessible to the average person in their quest to quench their knowledge on environmentalism. Be sure to leave your feedback by liking this week's released edition and by subscribing to this podcast. Again, any love from our followers is much appreciated. Signing off until next time.